It's 1998 in a remote California town at a secluded private school.
We could have a Halloween party, just the four of us. We could have a roaming orgy.
I love the way this man thinks.
No booze, no drugs, no kidding.
One teacher is living in fear.
I'm not who you think I am. I changed my name when I went into hiding.
Terrible. Take off your clothes.
My brother killed my sister.
How'd he do that?
With a really big kitchen knife.
That's enough. I can't take it, Mom. He's dead. It's been 20 years. What's he waiting for? Don't you think he would have shown up by now?
What's going on, baby?
I don't know. This is a sick joke.
Now,
Come on!
the face of good and the face of evil will meet one last time. But this time, it's going to be a fight to the finish. This summer, terror won't be taking a vacation. Halloween H20.
It's Halloween. I guess everyone is entitled to one good scare. I've had my share.
Alright, good evening everyone and welcome back to my YouTube reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about 1998's Halloween H20, 20 years later. The seventh film in the Halloween franchise. A reboot with a capital R. This movie erases everything, or really kind of doesn't erase it, but more or less ignores it. And picks up right after Halloween 2. Of course, Halloween 3 is its own movie within the franchise itself. It's its own thing, standalone film. But this movie is in essence the Halloween 3. To Halloween and Halloween 2. Kind of a long road to this movie because you get Halloween 6, which was... It was a movie that, it was, at the time, it kind of killed the franchise because you have a you had a lot of studio meddling that went along with Halloween H2O and, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, Halloween 6. And at the end of the day, while I love both cuts of Halloween 6, it was not a very well-received film when it finally come out. This was 6 years after Halloween 5, which already put a lot of questions in people's minds about where they were going to take the franchise after. And I think it was a interesting decision to follow that movie up. Which you really couldn't just simply ignore it. You had to provide some explanation. But they capitalized on that film. They presented a whole new story and layout with that movie. And when I get to Halloween 6, I'll talk more in depth about it. But Halloween H2O originally began as a direct-to-video sequel. And it was, I think, called The Two Faces of Evil or something like that. And it was going to be pretty interesting. It was basically going to follow a copycat killer. And basically, from what the writer Robert Zappia said, it was the Silence of the Lambs meets Halloween. So you basically had this copycat killer or whatever helping these people get to the actual Michael Myers. And basically from the start, they were to start brand new with the franchise. And basically not make a direct sequel to Halloween 6 and basically make something that was within its own continuity, I guess you could say. And it was, like I said, going to be direct to video and basically be a pre-Hellraiser franchise post 1996. But eventually Jamie Lee Curtis was back on board for the film, so they then rewrote the script itself to put her character in, and eventually it became this movie, Halloween H2O, 20 years later. And it follows Jamie Lee Curtis's character, Laurie Strode, 20 years after Halloween 2. And Halloween 2 had, the events of Halloween 2 had left Laurie Strode basically in a emotional mess. I think it's done much better in Halloween 2018 as far as showing the emotional side of everything. But she's an alcoholic, and she's basically there trying to keep her son within her grasp, where she doesn't have to worry about him being a victim or a potential victim to the shape. And it's got a good story to it. I'll say that. The story to it is good. And it then kind of puts in, it puts in the number 17. That's kind of, his sister was 17 when he murdered her, and then he came after Laurie when she was 17, and now he's back again when her son's 17. So it kind of put an emphasis on the number 17, which I thought was interesting. But at the end of the day, this was another movie that kind of received studio meddling. Not quite as much as Halloween 6. Halloween 6, it was basically totally rewritten by the time it came out. It went from one story to something that had very little to do with the original story at all. And the Weinsteins were supposedly the ones that had a lot to do with that. The studio wanted a slasher film, as the producers wanted a Halloween movie and wanted suspense and it to tell a story. But the people at Dimension, Weinsteins or whatever, they wanted a straight out gore fest. And that's what they got. But with studio meddling on this movie, it was the mask. There's 4 total masks that were used in this film. The Halloween 6 mask is resculpted for this movie. the best Michael looks in this movie. If he would have used this mask throughout the movie, I would think a whole lot more of this movie than I actually do. Spoiler alert, this is the one film in the Halloween franchise I hate. I like the first half of the film, but when it gets into the whole teenager drama, it I drop off, and it's just, from then on, it's that's it. It doesn't really pick up for me anymore. And Halloween H20, like I said, I'm more for it now than I used to be, of them basically rebooting the franchise. I'm more for it now than I used to be. And, 4, 5, and 6 are marked as never happening. So Jamie Lloyd is basically erased out of continuity. The whole Thorn cult, the Curse of Thorn, everything, that's all erased out of continuity. And the basic reason for it was they had nowhere to go. There could have been something continued with it, but they took the easy way out and went with something and rebooted they went with something newer and rebooted the franchise. And like I said, I support that now more than I did earlier. And I used to be a fan of this film. This used to be the Halloween film I could sit down and watch when I wanted to watch a Halloween film. Now it's a different story. I sometimes have no interest in ever watching this movie again. Don't ask me why I hate this movie so much. I went back and revisited it, and I just found myself hating it. I said, Michael's not Michael in this movie. He more or less should have been a copycat killer to get killed by Michael later in the movie. This should have been Friday the 13th Part 5, but a Halloween movie. And, that's the biggest thing to me. Michael's not Michael at the end of the movie. To me, it is someone else. And, that's the way I see it. I do like that they went back and they followed up 2. But I think they did enough good with following 2 up with 4. I think 4 covered the bases. They could have went back to 4 and said, oh, Jamie Lloyd's in a mental asylum. And just mentioned her. Followed up 4 with H20. Whatever the case may be. 10 years after Halloween 4. Or whatever. But, they didn't. And I understand why. It was rumored for years that there is a scene that bridges the gap between both of these movies. I've heard conflicting stories about that. Patrick Lussier, who edited this film together, said he never encountered any of that footage. Steve Miner said that from the start he had the intention of starting brand new, and I've also heard the same thing said by the writer. So I'm more so to believe that. Boy, do I wish that was the case. I wish there was this cut out there that was more, that connected it back to 6. And the thing I also have a huge issue with is it's tame. It's way too tame. To me, Scream and Scream 2 are more gorier than this film. And probably because they are, actually. But, this movie features hardly any gore at all. The special effects are underused in this movie. The best kill probably by far in the film is Marion Chambers. Marion Chambers. I was thinking Psycho, excuse me. Marion Chambers kill, or Marion Whittington as she's called in this movie. And, she's killed earlier in the film. And, she has her throat slit. And that's by far, to me, the best kill in the whole movie. All the other ones are the whole thing, there's a very low body count on this film as well, which I didn't particularly like. I did like they pulled kind of a Friday the 13th Part 2 and provided a reason for the kids leaving the school, and where it wasn't just this big plot hole to where did all the kids go, similar to kind of like Friday Part 8 with the people on the boat. They had all these kids, which is, if you make an inference, you can tell that when the bottom of the boat was covered in water, it killed all those people. But this movie, I don't really like this movie. I've said I hate it. Maybe I was being a little bit too brutal on this film, but I don't like this film, to be quite honest. There's a couple of different cuts of this movie, other than the theatrical cut. You've got a cut, a work print version, which the credits are a lot longer. You also got an FX TV version, which is interesting. It's, from what I heard, extended dialogue and more Michael stalking and stuff like that. So, not too much extended stuff for the movie. But, overall, I like Resurrection a lot more than this movie. I think Resurrection, to me, is a much better Halloween film than H20 is. And I mean, call me what you want to. Tell me I'm out of my mind. I like Resurrection. Don't know why. I dig that film. And I don't know if it's nostalgia for the reason I like it, or if it's because I'm crazy. I don't know. But I liked Resurrection. Yeah, it's a flawed film. And I give this movie an E for effort. This is a well done film. I'm not going to stand here or sit here and say that it's a bad made movie, because it's not. I think it's a well done film, but it's just so tame, even compared to the first one. I mean, it's so tame, and it came out at a time when gore and effects was not the best. I mean, not the best. Not the biggest thing in the world. I mean, the days of special effects artists had kind of passed by this point. I mean, you still had your KMBs, Tom Savini, Stan Winston, all of those people out there. But I mean, special effects really didn't come back into play until the mid-2000s with like Saw and stuff like that. And that's when that was more or less a lot of CGI in those films as well. But really kind of running out of things. I've touched on the masks. There's 4 masks in this movie. I've touched on only one. 6 masks, I think, should have been the one used throughout. I think that's another issue I have. Man, I'm going on another tangent, but or a rant. You can see Michael's eyes in this film. I think they do that much better with the next film. You do see his eyes some in Resurrection, but he's in the darkness a lot more in that movie than he is in this one. I mean, like I said, I think the 6 mask, which was it was resculpted by John Carl Buechler. That's the one that should have been used by far. Basically, the producers wanted one mask, the director wanted another, and I mean, they were basically they were all trying to appease one another, and I mean, the studio wanted one, the producers wanted another, and then, I mean, Steve Miner, he wanted the one done by KMB, which was, KMB done the, Halloween 5 mask. And you know the mixed reaction to that one, but, they did a version of the mask, and it's just basically a plain white mask with, I mean, it's kind of the Pillsbury Doughboy type mask, I guess is what you could say. Got a CGI mask, which was used through one instance of reshoots, and they said they don't even realize why that's even in the film. It looks pretty bad. It's kind of it kind of looks like the Resurrection Mask, kinda, but it's not very good. You've also got the Stan Winston mask, which is the standard H2O mask. It kind of looks a lot better and more influenced by the original than the K&B does, but I mean it shows his eyes even more, and I mean I didn't particularly like that. The definitive ending of the film, actually, I didn't talk about that either. The definitive ending, Michael gets his head cut off. Laurie Strode finally cuts his head off, and when I review Resurrection, I'll talk more about that. But basically, Jamie Lee Curtis came back to do this film. She wanted this to be the last Halloween film, and unfortunately for her, it was not, because that was the only reason I heard she agreed to come back, was because she wanted it to be the last Halloween film. And I like all the ones after this. She's of course come back now in these movies, and especially the one that's coming out this year, Halloween Kills, possibly coming out this year, depending on what all happens. But Halloween H2O, I give 7 out of 10, and I'll explain why. I think this is a good movie, and I've crapped on it throughout this review, saying I hated this movie. I think it's a well-made movie. I think the director's vision was what was made. It is a back-to-basics Halloween film. That's for sure. And that was what Steve Miner wanted to do. And he wanted to make a back-to-basics Halloween film. And I think with all due respect to him, that's what he done. And Steve Miner, of course, he directed Friday the 13th parts 2 and 3. And did a fantastic job on those. And I think he did a good job on this. But, I mean, I think this is a well-made movie, but as far as one of my favorites, it's not. So that's pretty much it. And hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe, and see you next time. Alright, well, I'm back real quick. This is going to be tacked on to the end of the H2O, Halloween H2O 20 years later review. I just wanted to touch on a couple of subjects that I didn't touch on in the review itself. The first one being the absence of Donald Pleasance in this movie. Donald Pleasance after the initial cut of Halloween 6 was created, he passed away. And I believe February of 95, I'm going to say February 2nd, or either February 4th. I can't exactly remember. But he passed away in February of 95. And when they commenced reshoots in 1995, he was not there. And that kind of left a hole in what some of the plot would be for the kind of reconfigured version of Halloween 6. And I mean, he is missed in Halloween H2O. That's one thing I also think is missing in this movie is Donald Pleasance. I think that he is the heart and soul of the Halloween franchise, and when he's not there, it's just a hole. And I mean, he is dearly missed by the Halloween fan base and as many people that's worked with him. I think he's missed dearly by them, and I miss him. I wish he was still alive to be in a lot of these movies, but he was not in this movie. This is the first Halloween without him, and also the film is dedicated to him, as with Halloween 6. And I think that's all for that. And also Kevin Williamson, the writer, of course, of Scream and Scream 2. He is uncredited for writing on this movie. He did write some on the film, but was uncredited. And according to what I've read, the producers wanted to sell this movie as from the writer of Scream, but the writer, Robert Zappia, did not like that, and he refused basically to have his credit shared with Kevin Williamson, or have Kevin Williamson have the center, I guess you could say, the center of attention as for writing. But Kevin Williamson did write a couple of treatments after Jamie Lee Curtis came on board, and I mean, you can tell that his influence is there as well. But he is, I think he's an executive producer on the movie. But he was involved, and also this is the first Halloween movie to not have Donald Pleasence. So I think that's it. Like I said, this will be tacked on to the H20 review. Hope you enjoy it, and now I'm going to go into some music, some various tracks by maybe some well-known bands, maybe probably more obscure music, maybe by obscure bands, and maybe by some well-known bands. I don't exactly know, but I hope you enjoy the music, and here we go. Alright, well, I'm back once again now to touch on something else I forgot about. The music controversy. John Ottman, who I think he worked with Steve Miner after this on the movie Lake Placid, he put together a score that was very Hitchcockian. It was all orchestra, and it was a very cool score. And maybe it didn't exactly match the feel of the Halloween scores in the past, but it was still interesting and someone bringing something new to the table. And I thought he did a very good job with it, but the score is cut to shreds in the movie. Some score from screams in the movie, as well as I think from the movie's Mimic. And Marco Beltrami, he did a lot of the additional score for the movie, because the producers did not really, they didn't want, they didn't particularly like the score that was put together by John Ottman. But also I wanted to touch on some of the cast real quick. You got Janet Leigh in this movie. I didn't talk about much of the cast other than Jamie Lee Curtis. You've got Janet Leigh, Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. I believe this is Janet Leigh's final film role, and she is in it. Her and Jamie Lee appear on screen together, and toward the kind of middle of the movie, and it's a good scene. Car from Psycho is in it, and there's kind of a musical cue from that movie in the movie, which is very cool. There's also LL Cool J. He plays probably the best character in the movie. A guy named Ronnie, who is a security guard. I believe I touched on him during this. No, I did not. I did not touch on him during this. But in another review, I did touch on his character, and I made mention that I didn't speak about him in this review. But here it is. I'm talking about him. You got Adam Arkin playing a great character in this movie named Will, Josh Hartnett, Michelle Williams, Jodie Lynn O'Keefe. You got Chris Duran as Michael Myers. He does an okay job for what he's given. He was supposed to come back for Halloween Resurrection, but didn't because of the filming taking place in Canada, so it would be cheaper for him to just get a Canadian stuntman than have to fly him all the way over or whatever. So he does a good job. And I just want to say, if it seemed like I really I hated on the movie a whole lot, I don't particularly like the film, to be honest. But I still do get it is a very nostalgic film for me. I do I don't like the film, but at the same time, I kind of do, if that makes any sense at all. But I was kind of hard on the film throughout. I really seemed to really hate the movie, and said I hated the movie, but I don't really hate it to be, well, I'm kind of on the fence on the movie, to be quite honest, but the things I said I didn't like, I really don't like in the movie. But that's it, and I said in the previous add-on that I was going into music. Now I'm going into music, so I hope you enjoy.
Help me through the day, help me through the night. Baby, your sweet loving make everything alright. Help me through tomorrow, when stormy weather comes. Lord, make me realize that you're my woman. I can see so much pain deep inside your eyes. I know the feeling, someone hurts you, when someone makes you cry. Help me through the day, help me through the night. Baby, make me realize you're my woman. Help me through the day, help me through the night. Baby, your sweet loving make everything alright. Help me through tomorrow, when stormy weather comes.
Alright, well, that was the song Help Me Through the Day by Whitesnake from their 1979 album Love Hunter. There's nothing like classic Snake. Love classic Whitesnake. Those early albums, to me, is the best Whitesnake. I love the stuff after that when they kind of morphed into more of a heavy metal band. But Help Me Through the Day is one of the best tracks on Love Hunter. And Love Hunter kind of, sometimes to me, is their best album, and other times it's Ready and Willing, or sometimes Come and Get It is my favorite. Sometimes it's Slide It In. It all depends on which day. I mean, my opinion changes every day, really. But that was Help Me Through the Day, and I hope you enjoyed that track. And now we're moving into some David Lee Roth tracks. Now I'm going to play 2 in a row and kind of end out everything. I'll come back at the end to give my final goodbyes. But these two, the first one is from the 1994 Your Filthy Little Mouth. It's one of my favorite tracks on the album. It's a very bluesier number called Land's Edge, and one of my favorites on the album, maybe my favorite. I don't really know yet, but I love Your Filthy Little Mouth. That's kind of a mouthful, really, but Your Filthy Little Mouth. I like that album quite a bit. It's got some very good tracks on there. It was at a time when rock was not the biggest thing in the world. It was more grunge at the time. And, well, David Lee Roth's style of kind of big rock was not in at the time. It was grunge and kind of gloom and doom a lot of times. But he kind of morphed into more kind of adult contemporary type stuff. And he did a good album with Your Filthy Little Mouth, I thought. Man, I keep messing that up. But I thought he did a good album. It may be a flawed album, but I still thought he did some good stuff. He had Terry Kilgore playing guitar, John Regan on bass, and several different session drummers. But he did a very good album. And then I'm going to close out the episode with a track from his next album, kind of the big single off that album, even though it was not advertised for nothing. It was distributed by David Lee Roth's own record company, What Was That Records, and a record label. And it was on the album DLR Band with John 5, very early John 5 on that album. And he did a lot that year, too, which in the future, maybe I'll play some tracks from that album on here. But the last track on here that I'll talk about is the first track and kind of the big single off that album, Slam Dunk, which is back to basics classic Van Halen. And DLR Band's one of his best albums. So I hope you enjoy these 2 tracks, and then I'll be back at the end to close things out.
Oh, don't touch that dial. Here's a word about my ex-girlfriend. Towards the end, conflict off and on. And I told her one night, honey, every time we fight, I'll write a verse to this song. Well, things got bad, things got worse. Still I struggle on. So sit back and get all comfortable, 'cause this little tune's 6 fucking hours long. And every journey's got destinations which the traveler can't expect. So how can I'm always winding up down here at Land's Edge? I don't know. Alright. Now if love is blind, why did her stockings legends, they're forever. Shut to shadow, watch me go. You wanna make power and your family win it? Next week is sleeping in it. That's the game we play. If I think I'm winning, slam dunk.
Alright, well, I'm back to close things out now. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I sure did. I hope you enjoy the material I brought to you today. Halloween H20 movie review, and then I played some tracks here at the end. I kind of want to do something kind of original and new. Just display some of my varying music taste. I like all kinds of music, but hope you enjoyed the music played on here, and I hope you enjoyed the movie review, and I'll be back with something very, very soon. So thank you, be safe, and see you next time.